All right, folks, how you doing? Welcome back. So this is William Wallace, Robin Hood Revealed, Part 2. Disclaimer. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use, yada, yada, yada. Loudon Hill. So Wallace gathered a small force at Sir Richard's estate in Riccarton. He had decided to avenge his father and brother at Loudon Hill after learning that the English knight Fenwick, who had slain them, would soon be passing by with a supply train. Despite having only 50 men, Wallace was confident that he could overcome the English knights, who outnumbered his force more than 3 to 1. Actually, it was closer to 4 to 1. It was 180 to 50. The Clyde would, so using a stone dyke and spears to counter the English knights, Wallace and his men prevailed. Enjoying the spoils of the English supply train, the Scots hid for the next 3 weeks in the Clyde wood. The English decided to make a peace treaty with Wallace, threatening the life of Sir Ranald if he refused to come to terms. Reluctantly, Wallace agreed. Summoned to Glasgow. So Wallace grew restless under the supervision of his uncle, and one day went back to Ayr with a small company. Guess how that went. He got into trouble again, unsurprisingly, and the English sternly warned Sir Ranald to control him. Remorseful, Wallace promised to behave and served as his uncle's squire for a short while. Sir Ranald was soon summoned to Glasgow to serve a judiciary in his capacity as Sheriff of Ayr. The Lennox. Along the road, Wallace once again encountered English troops abusing his uncle's servants, and he snapped. Furious, Wallace harshly rebuked Sir Ranald for cooperating with the English, then rode on ahead so as to distance himself from him. After catching up with the troops abusing his uncle's servants, he killed them and escaped to the Lennox. Stephen of Ireland. So the Lennox was an area where outcasts and rogues frequently congregated. The Highlanders and Irishmen who took refuge there shared common heritage, as well as a strong disdain for the English, who feared to venture there. Yeah, that was a no-go zone if you were English. They never went there unless it was in force, or unless they really had to. Sir Ranald was exonerated of his nephew's actions in Glasgow. Somehow. He must have had photos on him or something, but was warned to never again give him succour. Sir Ranald must have been really important. He somehow keeps getting away with it. What his nephew's up to. But it's a bit of a hair-scratcher, that one. Well, I won't tell you what happened to him. I was about to, but I don't want to spoil it. Anyway. Wallace found a natural following in the Lennox and was made chief over a small band of outlaws, including Stephen of Ireland. St. Johnston. Wallace and his band won many victories over unsuspecting English garrisons and patrols, all the while living off the land. Many remote caves were soon filled with English dead, outposts put to the sword, and resources scavenged. Emboldened, Wallace eventually set his sights on the Scottish capital, which was not Edinburgh at the time. It was now Perth. Wallace and his top lieutenants passed themselves off as merchants and labourers upon entering St. Johnston, or Perth as it is, as I say, these days. Yeah, it wasn't too subtle here. Wallace called himself Will Malcolmson. If the guards had been paying attention, they probably could have figured that one out. It's not very subtle. Kinclaven Castle. So during this time, he swallowed his pride and his anger, drinking with English soldiers to learn as much as he possibly could. He also took a local lover to take his mind off things. It was not long before Wallace and his men began to gather valuable intelligence on English troop movements. They set their sights on the nearby Kinclaven Castle, and they planned out an elaborate ambush to seize this important outpost. The English trap. Upon taking Kinclaven, Wallace allowed the English civilians to return home, which he always did, by the way. As a result, word soon spread of what had happened, and the English garrison at St. Johnston began searching for Wallace. At this time, he made a crucial error and began sneaking back into town to visit his secret lover. This did not go unnoticed, and the English soon sprang a trap for him, forcing the young woman to betray him with severe threats, like burning her alive, for example. Surrounded. So overcome with guilt, she confessed her treachery to Wallace, who disguised himself again as a woman, and again somehow this works, and managed to escape. The English realized that Wallace and his band could not be far away and surrounded the woods where they were hiding. Determined to avenge their defeat at Kinclaven, the English used tracking hounds to hunt down the outlaws. These English troops were elite knights, archers, and men at arms. Now, they weren't fucking around this time. They were out for blood, you know. They were getting serious through the woods. Wallace lost most of his men to the relentless English attacks, and soon he found himself completely alone at the gas call. He saw a vision of a demon who taunted him over the loss of his men. Wallace had to fight his way through endless miles of woods and swam the length of the Forth naked to reach safety. Unbeknownst to Wallace, two of his top lieutenants, Curly and Stephen of Ireland, had remained behind, but they were still alive. Sir John the Graham. So Wallace was given shelter and sustenance to regain his health and recover from his wounds by a kindly old lady and her sons who decided to join him. Curly and Stephen of Ireland were also there, and they were overjoyed to be reunited. Wallace then decided to visit a highborn knight, Sir John the Graham, who would prove to be Wallace's dearest ally and closest friend. Fresh followers. Rumours of Wallace's survival spread throughout the land. The English were untroubled, as they were certain that no one could have survived all that Wallace had gone through in the woods. Wallace slowly gathered fresh followers and rebuilt his strength. Wallace's family knew of his survival and did their best to help him without drawing attention. Marion Braidfoot. So Wallace began stalking English troops in Lanark, killing a great many of them quietly, which alarmed the local Sheriff Heselrigg. During this time, he met and fell in love with Marion Braidfoot, who was highborn and wealthy. Wallace was reluctant to approach her. The two did eventually meet, with Wallace pledging to marry her if and when the fighting ever came to an end. So that's the end of part 2. Thank you for joining me. See you in part 3.